The thunder of hooves matched the storm clouds gathering overhead, as Virgil Young pushed his exhausted mount harder toward the only home he had ever known. The muddy water of the swollen Arkansas River had already swallowed the first floor of his family's homestead when he crested the final hill overlooking their valley in the Colorado Territory. It was the spring of 1872, and Mother Nature had no mercy for those who staked their futures on her temperamental waters. "No," he shouted against the howling wind, spurring his horse forward even as lightning split the darkening sky. 3 generations of young men had built that place with their bare hands, and now the river they had depended upon for life was taking everything away. By the time Virgil reached what remained of the property, the main house was gone completely, the barn leaning precariously as brown, angry water churned around its foundations. Standing in the pouring rain, soaked to the bone and caked with mud, he watched helplessly as the last wall collapsed, carrying with it every possession and memory he had. At 32, Virgil found himself suddenly homeless, with nothing but his horse, the clothes on his back, and the pistol at his hip. His parents had passed 2 winters prior, leaving him alone to work the cattle ranch they had built. Now even that was gone. When the rain finally stopped, the destruction was complete. Not a single structure remained standing. His cattle had either drowned or scattered, and the fertile bottomland his family had farmed was buried beneath feet of silt and debris. Even the graves of his parents had been washed away, leaving nothing to mark their existence. Virgil made camp on higher ground that night, building a small fire from driftwood that had once been part of someone's life, perhaps even his own. As he stared into the flames, he considered his options. He could try to rebuild, but without money or help, it would be nearly impossible. He could seek work at another ranch, but pride made that thought bitter. The young men had always been their own masters. With the first light of dawn, he made his decision. With nothing left to hold him, he would ride to Willow Creek, the nearest town of any consequence. Perhaps there he could find work, earn enough to start again somewhere else. With a last look at the muddy expanse that had been his world, Virgil mounted his horse and rode away, never looking back at the place that had shaped him from boy to man. Willow Creek sat nestled in a valley 30 miles to the west, a growing settlement that served the scattered ranches and farms of the region as well as prospectors still chasing dreams of gold in the surrounding hills. It was no Denver or even Pueblo, but its wooden buildings, muddy Main Street, and bustling mercantile offered civilization to those living on the frontier. Virgil arrived late in the afternoon, his body aching with fatigue and hunger gnawing at his stomach. He had eaten the last of his provisions that morning. The town seemed to swell with activity as he rode down the main street. A new rail spur had recently connected Willow Creek to larger markets, bringing prosperity and new faces to the once sleepy settlement. He tied his horse outside the Willow Creek saloon, figuring it the best place to hear about work and perhaps find a hot meal. The establishment was busy despite the early hour, filled with cowhands, railroad workers, and the occasional prospector. The piano in the corner played a lively tune while men gathered around tables with cards and whiskey. Virgil approached the bar, ordered whiskey, and asked the barkeep about work. "Might try the Navarro place," the man suggested, pouring the amber liquid. "Heard they're looking for experienced hands. Got a big spread about 5 miles north of town." "Navarro?" Virgil questioned, the name unfamiliar to him despite having lived in the region his entire life. "Yep, Thomas Navarro bought the old Henderson place last year. Been expanding since. His daughter runs most of it now, though, since his accident." The barkeep leaned closer. "Tough as nails, that Tess Navarro. Fair, they say, but expects a full day's work. Virgil nodded, downing his whiskey in a single swallow. A woman running a ranch was unusual but not unheard of on the frontier. If she was hiring, he would swallow his pride and apply, at least until he could get back on his feet. "Where can I find this Navarro place?" he asked, placing his empty glass on the counter. "Follow the north road out of town. Can't miss it, big white house on a hill, new barn with a red roof. Tell 'em Jimmy sent you." After securing a room for the night at the modest boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Peterson, Virgil spent the evening gathering information about the Navarro ranch. He learned that Thomas Navarro had come from Texas with considerable wealth and purchased one of the largest cattle operations in the area. A riding accident had left him partially paralyzed the previous fall, and his daughter had taken over the daily operations. Morning came with clear skies, a stark contrast to the storms that had destroyed his life just days before. Virgil rose early, ate a simple breakfast, and rode north out of town. He had cleaned himself up as best he could, shaving and wearing his least worn shirt, understanding the importance of first impressions when seeking employment. The Navarro ranch was indeed impossible to miss. The white clapboard house stood proudly on a rise overlooking lush pastureland. A new barn with a gleaming red roof dominated the cluster of outbuildings, while cattle grazed contentedly in the distance. It was the kind of spread Virgil had always dreamed his own ranch might become one day before the river took that dream away. As he approached the main house, a woman emerged onto the wide front porch. Even from a distance, Virgil could see she was tall and straight-backed, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore men's trousers and a work shirt, with a pistol visible on her hip, practical attire for ranch work, if unconventional for a woman. "Can I help you?" she called out as he reined his horse to a stop. Virgil removed his hat respectfully. "Madam, I was told in town you might be looking for hands. I have experience." She descended the porch steps, approaching his horse with confident strides. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26. Her skin was sun-browned, her eyes a startling clear green against her olive complexion. "I'm Tess Navarro," she said, offering no smile but extending a hand to shake in the manner of men. "We did lose 2 hands last month to the railroad. They pay better than I can." Virgil dismounted and took her hand, finding her grip firm and calloused the hand of someone who worked alongside her men. "Virgil Young, madam. I had a place east of here along the Arkansas." Recognition flashed in her eyes. "Had, River took it. Everything." He didn't elaborate, seeing no need to detail his losses. Tess studied him for a long moment, her gaze assessing. "Sorry to hear that. The river's been a monster this spring." She gestured toward a nearby corral where several men were breaking horses. "You good with cattle, horses?" "Born to it, madam. Worked cattle my whole life, and I can break a horse as gentle or keep it as spirited as you need." She nodded. "We can try you for a week. Pays $30 a month plus room and board. Bunkhouse is behind the barn. No drinking on the job, no fighting with the other hands." "I run a tight operation here." "Yes, madam. And don't call me madam, makes me feel like my mother. It's Tess to the hands, Miss Navarro to everyone else." Virgil nodded, finding himself intrigued by this forthright woman. "Thank you for the opportunity. Tess, don't thank me yet. You haven't seen what I'll have you doing." A hint of a smile touched her lips then, transforming her serious face and revealing a dimple in her right cheek. "Report to Hank, my foreman. Big fellow with the red beard by the corral. He'll set you up." With that, she turned and walked back toward the house, her stride purposeful. Virgil watched her go, realizing that working for a woman might be a new experience but one he could likely manage, at least until he figured out his next move. The bunkhouse was clean and well-maintained, with 10 bunks though only 7 appeared occupied. The men eyed Virgil with the usual wariness reserved for newcomers, but made room for him without complaint. Hank, the foreman, was a mountain of a man with a flaming red beard and hands like hams, but his demeanor was fair as he explained the operation. "Miss Navarro expects hard work, but she works harder than any of us," Hank explained as he showed Virgil around. "She's up before dawn and often still working after dark. Her father was a good boss, but she's making this place even better." "How'd she learn ranching?" Virgil asked, curious about the unusual circumstance. "Born to it, like you said about yourself." "Her mother died when she was young and her father raised her like the son he never had, taught her everything. When he got injured last year, she stepped right in. Some of the hands quit, couldn't stomach taking orders from a woman." Hank spat on the ground. "Their loss. Best boss I ever had." Virgil's first days at the Navarro ranch were filled with the backbreaking work familiar to any cattleman. He mended fences, moved cattle between pastures, and helped break new horses. The routine was comforting after the chaos of losing everything, and he found himself grateful for the physical exhaustion that allowed him to sleep without dreams of raging water. Tess Navarro was everywhere. It seemed checking fence lines, discussing breeding stock with Hank, negotiating with buyers, even joining the hands for meals in the cookhouse rather than eating in the main house. She was knowledgeable and decisive, earning respect through competence rather than demanding it through position. On his 5th day, Virgil was assigned to help move a herd to fresh pasture. Tess rode with them, her seat in the saddle as natural as breathing. They worked well together, anticipating movements of the cattle with the instinctive understanding of those raised to the work. "You're good with them," she commented as they paused on a ridge, watching the cattle spread out in the new pasture below. "Thank you." "Been doing it since I could sit a horse," Virgil replied, taking a drink from his canteen. "Tell me about your place," she said suddenly. "The one the river took." Virgil hesitated, the loss still raw. "Not much to tell. My grandfather staked it after the war with Mexico. Built it up over the years. My father expanded it. I was hoping to do the same." "How much land?" 600 acres, though only about 200 workable. Rest was too rocky or steep. Ran about 300 head of cattle. It wasn't the biggest spread, but it was ours. He cleared his throat. "Or it was." Tess studied him, her green eyes thoughtful. "You planning to rebuild?" Virgil shook his head. "Land's gone. River changed course, took most of the good bottomland with it. What's left wouldn't support enough cattle to make it worthwhile." He sighed, looking out over the horizon. "Besides, would take money I don't have." "So what will you do?" "Work, save, maybe head further west eventually, stake a new claim," he shrugged. "Or just keep working for others. Haven't decided yet." Tess nodded, seeming to understand his reluctance to make firm plans when the future felt so uncertain. "Well, you've got a place here as long as you need it. Hank says you're one of the best hands he's seen in years." The compliment, delivered matter-of-factly, warmed Virgil unexpectedly. "Appreciate that." They rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, and Virgil found himself watching Tess more than was strictly necessary. There was something compelling about the way she carried herself, confident yet without arrogance. By the time they reached the ranch, he had decided to stay longer than he'd initially planned. As weeks passed, Virgil settled into life at the Navarro ranch. The other hands accepted him, especially after he proved his worth during a particularly difficult cattle drive to the railhead in Pueblo. He began to learn the rhythms of the place, which pastures flooded first after heavy rains, which section of fence always needed mending after strong winds, how Tess liked the horses exercised regularly even when not in use. He also began to see more of Thomas Navarro, Tess's father. The older man spent most days in a wheelchair on the front porch, observing the ranch operations and offering advice when asked. Despite his physical limitations, his mind remained sharp, and Virgil found him to be knowledgeable and fair-minded. "You've been a good addition here, Young," Thomas told him one evening when Virgil had been summoned to the main house to discuss a new breeding program. "Tess speaks highly of your work." "Thank you, sir. It's a well-run operation." Thomas nodded proudly. "My daughter's doing. I built something decent, but she's making it exceptional." He wheeled his chair to a small side table and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, offering one to Virgil. "I hear you lost your own place recently." Virgil accepted the drink with a nod. "Yes, sir. River took it all. Damnable shame. A man's land is part of him out here." Thomas sipped his whiskey thoughtfully. "Tess mentioned you might be looking to start fresh elsewhere eventually. Been considering it. Need capital first, though." "Well, no rush to leave, I hope." Good hands are hard to find, especially ones who don't balk at taking orders from a woman. Thomas's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Though I suspect you see her as more than just the boss." Virgil nearly choked on his whiskey, surprised by the direct observation. "Sir," Thomas waved away his protest. "No need to explain, I have eyes, son. The way you look at her isn't just respect for an employer." His expression grew more serious. "My Tess has had to be harder than most to earn her place. Doesn't leave much room for softness, but she deserves happiness." Before Virgil could formulate a response, Tess herself entered the room, bringing with her the scent of horses and open air. She raised an eyebrow at the whiskey glasses but made no comment. "The new bull arrived from Denver," she announced. "Looks promising. You should come see him tomorrow, Papa." "I will," Thomas promised. "Virgil and I were just discussing the breeding program." Tess glanced between them, clearly sensing there had been more to the conversation. "Were you now? And what insights has our newest hand offered?" The slight emphasis on newest reminded Virgil of his place, and he set down his glass. "Just listening and learning, Miss Navarro. Your father knows this country better than most." "He does," she agreed, her expression softening when she looked at her father. "Though he's also known to meddle where he shouldn't." Thomas laughed. "A father's prerogative, my dear." He winked at Virgil. "Think about what I said, Young. No hurry to decide." As spring turned to summer, Virgil found himself increasingly drawn to Tess. He admired her intelligence and determination, her fair treatment of the hands, and her deep knowledge of ranching. He began volunteering for assignments that would put him in her proximity, and she seemed to seek his opinion more frequently than that of other hands. It was during a violent summer thunderstorm that their relationship shifted. Virgil was checking on the horses in the barn when Tess rushed in, soaked from the sudden downpour. Her usual braid had come partially undone, dark tendrils of hair clinging to her face and neck. "That came up fast," she gasped, shaking water from her hat. "Reminded me of the storm that took your place." Virgil nodded, the memory of that day still vivid. Nature doesn't give much warning sometimes. They worked together to calm the nervous horses, moving methodically from stall to stall. When they reached the last stall, thunder crashed directly overhead, startling the young mare inside. The horse reared, striking out with its front hooves. Without thinking, Virgil pulled Tess back, shielding her with his body as the hoof barely missed them. When the danger passed, he became acutely aware of her proximity, her back pressed against his chest, his arms still around her waist. For a moment neither moved. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice unusually quiet. "That was close." Virgil released her slowly, stepping back. "Just instinct." Tess turned to face him, her expression unreadable in the dim light of the barn. Most men's instinct wouldn't be to protect the boss. I wasn't thinking of you as the boss right then, he admitted. Something shifted in her eyes, a vulnerability he hadn't seen before. What were you thinking of me as? The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities. Virgil knew his answer could change everything. As someone I've come to care about, he said finally, deciding honesty was the only path forward. Someone I'd hate to see hurt. Tess's breath caught audibly. For a long moment she said nothing, and Virgil feared he'd overstepped. Then, slowly, she reached up and touched his face, her calloused fingers gentle against his cheek. "No one's seen me that way in a long time," she whispered. "Just as a person, not as Thomas Navarro's daughter or the woman running the ranch." "I see you," Virgil said simply. The kiss that followed was tentative at first, both of them unsure of this new territory. But as the storm raged outside, something equally powerful awakened between them, and uncertainty gave way to hunger long denied. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Tess stepped back, her composure returning even as color heightened her cheeks. "This complicates things," she said pragmatically. Virgil nodded. "It does. The hands can't know, not yet. It would undermine my authority." "I understand." Tess straightened her shirt, tucking loose strands of hair back into her braid with practiced movements. "We should talk about this. But not now, not here." "Whenever you're ready," Virgil promised. She nodded once, businesslike again except for the lingering softness in her eyes. "Check the north pasture fence when the storm passes. I'm concerned about flooding with all this rain." With that, she was gone, striding through the rain back to the main house, leaving Virgil to wonder what had just happened and what it might mean for his future. The next few days brought an awkward dance of professional interaction and stolen glances. They were never alone, always surrounded by ranch hands or Tess's father. Virgil began to wonder if she regretted the moment in the barn and had decided to pretend it never happened. Then, nearly a week after the storm, a note appeared on his bunk. "Ride to Widow's Peak at sunset. Come alone." Widow's Peak was a rocky outcropping on the northern edge of Navarro land, offering views across the valley. Virgil arrived just as the sun was beginning its descent, painting the landscape in golds and reds. Tess was already there, sitting on a flat rock, her horse grazing nearby. She wore a dress the first time he had seen her in anything but work clothes. It was a simple blue calico, but the way it softened her appearance made his heart quicken. "I was beginning to think you were avoiding me," he said as he dismounted. "I was," she admitted candidly. "I needed time to think." Virgil sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "And what did you decide?" Tess looked out over the valley, her profile outlined in golden light. "That I'm afraid." "Of what? Of this? Of you? Of wanting something for myself?" She turned to face him fully. "This ranch, my father, the hands, they all depend on me. I've spent years proving I'm as capable as any man, that I can be trusted to run this place. I can't afford to be seen as just a woman with feelings." Virgil understood her fear. A woman in her position walked a precarious line. "What happened between us doesn't make you less capable, doesn't change who you are. Doesn't it? People will see it that way. They'll think I'm distracted, or worse, that I'm letting a man make decisions for me." She shook her head. "And you lost everything. You're still figuring out your next steps. I don't want to be something you cling to just because you're adrift." Her insight stung because there was truth in it. Virgil had lost his anchor when the river took his land. But what he felt for Tess had grown independently of that loss. "Fair enough," he conceded. "But let me ask you something. If I still had my ranch, if I came to you as a neighboring rancher instead of a hired hand, would you still be so afraid? The question seemed to catch her off guard. I don't know. Maybe not in the same way, but then maybe the problem isn't what we feel but the circumstances around it. Virgil moved closer, taking her hand in his. Tess, I won't pretend I'm not still finding my way after losing everything. But what I feel for you isn't about needing an anchor. It's about discovering something I wasn't looking for. Tess looked down at their joined hands, her thumb moving unconsciously against his skin. I wasn't looking either, she admitted softly. I've always been too busy for this sort of thing. So where does that leave us? She met his eyes, determination replacing uncertainty. I propose a compromise. We see where this leads, but discreetly. I need to maintain my authority with the hands, and you need time to figure out your future. If after a few months we still feel this way, we'll be more open about it. It wasn't perfect, but Virgil understood her reasoning. Agreed. To seal their arrangement, they shared another kiss as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land that had brought them together. The following weeks established a new pattern. By day, Virgil was just another ranch hand, and Tess the capable, no-nonsense ranch manager. But there were stolen moments riding together to check distant pastures, meetings that stretched longer than necessary, occasional encounters in town that could be explained as business. Tess Navarro watched their careful dance with knowing eyes but said nothing, respecting his daughter's need to manage the situation in her own way. However, he did begin inviting Virgil to more meals at the main house, creating legitimate opportunities for them to spend time together. As summer progressed, so did their relationship, deepening into something neither had expected to find. Virgil learned that beneath Tess's practical exterior beat a passionate heart, one that loved poetry and dreamed of seeing the ocean someday. Tess discovered that Virgil's calm demeanor hid a sharp wit and unexpected tenderness. One evening in late August, they rode to a secluded spot by a stream that cut through Navarro land. The day had been hot, the night bringing blessed relief as stars appeared overhead. I've been thinking, Tess said as they sat side by side, boots off, feet cooling in the clear water. Dangerous occupation, Virgil teased, earning a playful splash. I'm serious. I've been thinking about your land, what's left of it. Virgil stiffened slightly. He rarely spoke of his lost property anymore, the pain having dulled to a persistent ache rather than the sharp agony of those first days. What about it? He asked. Have you been back since the flood? He shook his head. No point. It's gone. Maybe not all of it. Tess turned to face him fully. The river changed course, yes, but that means it left some land behind too, land that might be usable. Virgil frowned, considering this perspective for the first time. Even if that's true, it wouldn't be enough for what I had before. No, but it might be a start. Combined with other land. What other land? Tess took a deep breath. The eastern section of our ranch butts up against where your property was, about 500 acres that we don't use much because it's too far from the main operation. Good land, though, just inconvenient for us. Virgil stared at her, beginning to understand what she was suggesting. Tess, I can't afford to buy land from you even if it is inconvenient. Who said anything about buying? She took his hand. I've talked to my father. He agrees it makes sense to consider a partnership. A partnership. The word felt loaded with meaning beyond business. Yes, the Navarro Young Ranch, your knowledge combined with our resources. We'd start by giving you management of that eastern section plus whatever's salvageable from your original property. You'd rebuild there, run it your way, but as part of the larger operation. Virgil was stunned by the offer. It was generous beyond anything he could have expected, a chance to regain what he had lost while still maintaining his pride. Why would you do this? He asked finally. Tess's expression softened. "Because I love you," she said simply, the first time either had spoken the words aloud. "And because you're too good a rancher to waste your talents working for someone else." Emotion threatened to overwhelm Virgil. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I love you too," he whispered. "But this is too much to give." Tess pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. "It's not giving, it's investing in our future together." She smiled wryly. "Besides, it's still my father's ranch. I'm just managing it. This was his idea as much as mine." "Your father suggested this." Virgil was skeptical. "He did. Said he was tired of watching us sneak around like teenagers." Her laugh was bright in the darkness. "Apparently we weren't as discreet as we thought." The realization that Tess Navarro not only knew about their relationship, but approved enough to suggest merging their futures left Virgil speechless. Finally, he found his voice. "I need to see the land first. What's left of mine, and the section you're talking about. Need to know if it's really workable, of course." Tess nodded. "We can ride out tomorrow, and if it is workable," Virgil continued carefully, "I'd want to make sure the partnership is fair. I won't be a charity case, Tess. I need to contribute equally." "You will. With your skills, your labor, your ideas." She squeezed his hand. "This isn't charity, Virgil. It's opportunity for both of us." The next day they rode east toward what had been Young property. Virgil felt a knot form in his stomach as they approached the area, memories of the devastating flood still fresh despite the months that had passed. The land had changed dramatically. Where his family's house had stood was now a wide, shallow section of the Arkansas River. But as Tess had suggested, the river's new course had left behind land that had previously been underwater fertile soil deposited by years of seasonal flooding. "See there." Tess pointed to a flat area above the new riverbank. "High enough to be safe from future floods. Good building site." Virgil nodded, surveying the landscape with a rancher's eye. The loss of his family home still stung, but he could see the potential in what remained. When they rode further to view the eastern section of Navarro land that would be part of their proposed partnership, his hope grew stronger. It was good grazing land with reliable water sources and natural boundaries that would make it easier to manage cattle. By the time they returned to the ranch that evening, Virgil had made his decision. The partnership made sense not just for his heart, but for his head as well. It would allow him to be a landowner again, to build something of his own while contributing to the larger Navarro operation. Tess Navarro was waiting on the front porch when they returned, his wheelchair positioned to catch the evening breeze. He waved them over, eyes twinkling with interest. "Well, what did you think of my proposition, Young?" Virgil dismounted and approached the older man with respect. "It's a generous offer, sir. I'm inclined to accept with a few conditions." Tess laughed. "Wouldn't expect anything less from a man worthy of my daughter. Come inside, both of you. Let's discuss those conditions over dinner." The negotiations were straightforward. Virgil would manage the eastern section of the ranch, rebuilding on what remained of his family's land. He would contribute his labor and expertise in exchange for an ownership stake that would grow over time. Any cattle he brought in or bred would be his, while he would receive a percentage of profits from the overall Navarro herd. "There's one more thing," Tess said as they finished detailing the arrangement. "This partnership between you and my daughter, I assume it extends beyond business." Virgil glanced at Tess, who nodded her permission. "Yes, sir. I love your daughter and hope to make her my wife if she'll have me." Tess's sharp intake of breath suggested she hadn't expected such a direct declaration. Tess, however, simply smiled. "About time you said it out loud, son. Been watching you two dance around each other for months." He wheeled his chair closer to Virgil. "My Tess deserves a man who sees her strength as an asset, not a threat. Seems you fit that description." I do, sir. Thomas nodded, satisfied. Then you have my blessing. Though I suspect you'd have proceeded with or without it. Tess laughed, the sound bright with happiness. You know me too well, Papa. Later, walking in the garden behind the main house, Virgil and Tess had a moment alone for the first time since his impromptu proposal. Did you mean it? Tess asked, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. About wanting to marry me, Virgil stopped, turning to face her fully. I meant every word, though I should probably do this properly. He knelt before her, taking her hand in his. Tess Navarro, I came here with nothing but a horse and the clothes on my back. You gave me work, purpose, and most importantly, your heart. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears rare for the stoic rancher glistened in Tess's eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. Their kiss sealed the promise, sweet with the knowledge that what had begun in loss would continue in abundance. Word spread quickly through the ranch that Virgil Young would be taking over management of the eastern section, and that he and Miss Navarro were engaged. Some hands grumbled, suspecting favoritism, but most recognized the practical wisdom of the arrangement. Virgil had proven himself a skilled rancher and natural leader during his months on the Navarro spread. Construction began immediately on a new house at the site Tess had identified. It would be modest at first, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a living area, but built with expansion in mind as their family grew. The hands pitched in, recognizing that strengthening the Navarro ranch benefited them all. Tess insisted their wedding wait until the house was complete. I want us to start our married life in our own home, she explained. A fresh beginning for both of us. Virgil understood her reasoning. Though she never said it directly, he knew she wanted their marriage to start on equal footing, not with him moving into the house her father had built, but in a place they created together. As autumn painted the Colorado landscape in brilliant colors, the house took shape. Virgil worked alongside the builders each day, his hands blistered and back aching, but his heart full. When he wasn't working on the house, he was assessing the land, planning pasture rotation, and preparing for the cattle he would bring in the following spring. Their wedding day dawned clear and cool in early November. The ceremony took place on the front porch of their new home, with Thomas Navarro proudly giving his daughter away. Tess wore a simple white dress with a blue sash, a sprig of late-blooming wildflowers in her hair. Virgil, standing tall in a new suit, felt his breath catch at the sight of her approaching. The celebration afterward combined the traditions of a rancher's wedding with the elegance Thomas Navarro insisted upon for his only daughter. Tables laden with food stretched across the yard, while a small band played for dancing into the evening. Ranch hands mingled with businessmen from Willow Creek and neighboring ranchers, all raising glasses to the couple's future. As twilight fell, Virgil found a moment alone with his new father-in-law. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." Thomas waved away the gratitude. "You've made my daughter happier than I've seen her in years. That's thanks enough." He looked toward where Tess was laughing with some of the women from town. "She's always been strong, my Tess. Had to be. But strength doesn't have to mean solitude. I'm glad she found someone who understands that." Later that night, when the guests had departed and they were finally alone in their new home, Virgil held Tess close as they stood on their front porch, looking out over what would become their shared legacy. "When the river took my home, I thought I'd lost everything," he murmured against her hair. "I never imagined I'd gain so much more." Tess turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. "The river may have taken your home," she said softly, "but I've given you a place in my heart instead." "And I've given you mine," Virgil replied, sealing the promise with a kiss as stars spread across the vast Colorado sky above them. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys to the Young Navarro partnership. Their first winter tested the soundness of the new house and their ability to work together as equals rather than employer and employee. They established new routines and boundaries, learning when to consult each other and when to trust independent decisions. Spring brought the first cattle to the eastern section, a modest herd of 50 head that Virgil had purchased with his savings and a small loan from Thomas. Tess insisted on helping drive them to their new pastures, working alongside Virgil as they established this first tangible asset of their partnership. By summer, it became clear that their family would be expanding sooner than planned. Tess's pregnancy brought joy tempered with practical concerns. She refused to reduce her workload until absolutely necessary, adapting her responsibilities rather than abandoning them. "Women have been having babies while working the land for generations," she told Virgil when he suggested she rest more. "I'm not made of porcelain." Nevertheless, he found ways to lighten her load without wounding her pride, taking on tasks that would have required long rides or heavy lifting. Thomas Navarro was ecstatic at the prospect of a grandchild, commissioning an elaborately carved cradle from a craftsman in Denver. "Been waiting for this longer than you know," he admitted to Virgil. "Was beginning to think my stubborn daughter would never find a man worthy of her." Their son, Samuel Thomas Young, arrived on a crisp autumn day in 1873, strong, lunged, and healthy. He had Virgil's dark hair and Tess's determined chin, a combination that made both parents laugh. "Poor child," Tess said as she cradled him. "He's doomed to stubbornness from both sides." Motherhood softened Tess in ways Virgil hadn't anticipated. She remained the capable rancher, returning to work as soon as she was physically able. But there was a new dimension to her, a tenderness, when she held their son that made Virgil fall in love with her all over again. They established a system that allowed both to continue working while sharing care of Samuel. A room adjacent to the ranch office was converted into a nursery where Tess could keep him nearby during the day. When she needed to ride out, Virgil adjusted his schedule to take over, or Samuel stayed with his grandfather, who delighted in the boy's company. As their son grew, so did their operation. The partnership proved more successful than either had anticipated. Virgil's instinct for breeding produced cattle that brought premium prices, while Tess's business acumen expanded their markets. The eastern section, once considered the least valuable part of Navarro land, became increasingly productive under Virgil's management. Thomas's health began to decline during Samuel's third year, his condition gradually worsening until he was confined to bed most days. Even then, he insisted on regular reports about the ranch and his grandson's development. "Promise me you'll keep building what we've started," he told Virgil during one of their private conversations. "Not just the ranch, but the family. Tess deserves both." "I promise," Virgil assured him, gripping the older man's hand firmly. Thomas Navarro passed peacefully in his sleep the following winter, leaving the main ranch fully to Tess. The loss hit her hard. Her father had been her teacher, mentor, and strongest supporter. In her grief, she threw herself into work, expanding their cattle operation and negotiating new contracts with Eastern buyers. Virgil supported her through the mourning process, understanding that work was how she processed her emotions. He took on more responsibility with Samuel, ensuring their son didn't feel the absence of either parent too keenly during this difficult time. Gradually, Tess emerged from her grief, her resilience one of the many qualities Virgil admired. "Papa would be proud of what we're building," she said one evening as they reviewed the ranch ledgers together. "Both the business and our family." The following spring brought another addition to their family, a daughter they named Elizabeth Rose, after both their mothers. With 2 children, they expanded their house, adding rooms and modern conveniences as their prosperity increased. By 1880, the Navarro Young Ranch had become one of the most successful operations in Colorado Territory. Their breeding stock was sought after throughout the West, and their business practices were considered progressive for the time. They employed a diverse workforce, including several women in roles typically reserved for men, and maintained fair relationships with neighboring ranches and farms. One evening, nearly 8 years after the flood that had changed the course of Virgil's life, he and Tess stood on the bluff overlooking what had once been his family's homestead. The river had settled into its new channel, the scars on the land healed by time and nature's resilience. "Do you ever regret it?" Tess asked, leaning against his shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the landscape in gold. "Losing your independence, having to partner with us instead of running your own place?" Virgil considered the question seriously. "I regretted it at first," he admitted. "Pride is a hard thing to swallow. But now—" He turned to face her, taking in the strength and beauty that had only increased with the passing years. "Now I see it was the best thing that could have happened. The river took my home, but it led me to you." Tess smiled, the expression softening the lines that responsibility and motherhood had begun to etch around her eyes. "And I gave you a place in my heart instead." "The best trade I ever made," Virgil affirmed, pulling her close as the last light faded from the Colorado sky. Their children grew strong and capable, learning ranching from both parents while receiving the education Thomas Navarro had insisted was important for the future. Samuel showed Virgil's affinity for working with animals, while Elizabeth inherited Tess's head for business and numbers. As the century drew to a close, and Colorado established itself firmly as a state rather than a territory, the Navarro Young Ranch stood as testament to what partnership could achieve not just in business, but in life and love as well. The river that had once taken everything from Virgil Young had, in its way, given him far more than he had lost. Where water had destroyed, new foundations had been built. Where currents had carved away land, new boundaries were established. And where a man had once stood alone, watching his past disappear, a family now flourished, their future as vast and promising as the western sky above them. Each evening, no matter how busy the day had been, Virgil and Tess made time to sit together on their porch, watching the sun set over the land they had shaped together. It was during these quiet moments that they often reflected on the journey that had brought them to each other, a journey that began with loss, but culminated in abundance neither could have imagined. "The river gives and the river takes away," Tess would sometimes say, echoing an old saying her father had taught her. "But what matters is what we build from what remains." And what they had built, their ranch, their family, their love, stood strong against the ever-changing currents of life on the Colorado frontier, as enduring as the land itself.